Okay, so today I'm gonna show you the glorious behind the scenes of my first ever no-budget short film, Whispers. If you haven't seen it yet, there's a link down below in the description. It's just 90 seconds long. This video will be quite a bit longer because there's so much to talk about. The gear that I used, the location, and then of course I'll show you the behind the scenes, how I did all the shots and the practical special effects. I'll try to cover as much as possible without making this video too long, but if I forget something, then you know how it works. Comments down below, feel free to ask me or Joanna anything. Okay, now, first of all, this is a no-budget short film, and I want to emphasize no budget. You'll see there's a lot of improvisation going on, and you might also see some weird techniques. The result is not always perfect, but I still love it. And I learned so much. That's why I would highly recommend you to try something like this yourself. You'll learn a ton. And like I said, you don't need much. I shot this entire short film with my Canon M50, a basic entry-level mirrorless camera. Most of you watching probably have a camera at least similar to this one. Now, some of you have asked me why I didn't use my Sony a7S III for this short film. And well, that's just because I like a challenge. I like to create something with the most basic gear I have. And more importantly, gear that's similar to gear you all have. Because again, I want to inspire all of you to make a short film like this yourself. And I promise you, we're gonna do a challenge. I'll talk about it in one of the next videos. So have a little bit of patience. But anyway, so what else did I use? This is a 22mm lens. That's a 35mm on full frame. I also used an ND filter that was only necessary for a few shots, not all of them. And the aperture was set on 2.0 for all the shots. Then I also used my Pixel RGB light, and for some shots, this stabilizer. I think half of the shots was handheld and half of the shots I used this stabilizer. But that's where it went kind of wrong. I mean, not really wrong, but stabilization, I had some problems. Because I shot everything in 4K 24 frames per second, but the Canon M50 has a significant crop when shooting in 4K. I think it's like 2.5 times. So the 22mm is not at all a 22mm anymore when shooting in 4K. It's a lot longer. And the problem is then that it's a lot more difficult to get stable shots. The longer the focal length, the more difficult it is. Especially handheld, of course. The shots that I did with the stabilizer look pretty good because I wanted some of that movement that you don't get when using a gimbal. But handheld, I didn't get it always right. Sometimes there were just too many micro shakes, and then the digital stabilization of the Canon M50, it's also not that good, so there's a weird wobble sometimes. So what I should have done is use the stabilizer for all the shots, also the shots that don't have any movement, because the weight of the stabilizer will help you to keep the shot steady, and it will remove all those little micro shakes. So remember that, if your camera also has a big crop in 4K, it will make it more difficult to shoot handheld. Oh, and also I used manual focus for all the shots. So that's basically all I used. Camera, stabilizer, and my Pixel RGB light. Okay, and then next is actors and location. And luckily, I have the best girlfriend in the world. I'm sorry guys, she's mine. But yeah, so she doesn't mind acting in all my crazy little projects, and thank you babe for that. And yeah, what can I say? She did a great job. Of course, it's not perfect, but again guys, it's not about making it perfect. This is all one big learning experience. And for the locations, I think the best tip is keep it simple. Use one location for your film, one room or one location outside, and ideally it should be a location that you know well. I shot my film close to our house here, it's just a few minutes away, and I know that location. I know the backgrounds, I know that there aren't too many people around usually, and I know how the light is in the evening. And talking about light, that was actually the biggest challenge that I had, light. Because I wanted to shoot everything right after sunset to get that blue hour effect. But first of all, that gave me only like 20 to 25 minutes every night. After that, it's just too dark for my camera because it's not great in low light. So it was pretty much impossible to do it all in one night. I think it took us 5 nights to shoot. And then secondly, I had to shoot in the direction of where the sun sets, but also in the opposite direction. Now, the problem is that even when the sun is gone, that part of the sky where the sun sets is still relatively bright compared to the other side. Now, my Sony a7S III can handle that, no problem, but this little guy, no, way too much contrast. So I either had to expose for the highlights or the shadows, but getting detail in both was almost impossible. So what I did is I planned all my shots every evening. The first shots that I did every evening were the shots away from the part of the sky where the sun had set. You know, the part of the sky that's a little bit darker. And then when the sun was gone even more, then I did all the shots in the direction of the part of the sky where the sun had set. Does that make sense? So when the sun sets, there's always a part of the sky that's still very bright, and then the opposite side is darker. That's how I tried to solve that problem. And it's also crazy how much the light changes in just 20 minutes. I think every evening I started at ISO 200, and then 10-15 minutes later, I was already at ISO 1600. Now, again, my Sony a7S III, it wouldn't have been a problem, but with my Canon M50, there's a big difference in the image quality between ISO 200 and ISO 1600. I tried to fix it and make all the shots look the same by adding grain to the shots shot in ISO 200 and then adding a little bit of grain to the shots shot in ISO 1600, but yeah, I mean, it worked a little bit, but the problem is that when you add grain in post, YouTube compression looks even worse. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but there was some weird flicker in the grass sometimes and some weird artifacts, and that's not there in the original file that appeared after the upload. So that's where I struggled the most in post, matching the colors and the contrast of all the shots. The low light image quality, I think, was the biggest problem because it's a horror film and you do want some color grading. But there's very little information to work with. The files are... it's difficult. A solution probably would have been to add some more light to some shots with my Pixel RGB light. Just a little bit, I think, would have helped a lot. And ideally, I also should have done just one shot every night at the same time and exactly the same ISO. But of course, I think I have like 30 shots in that short film. It would take me a month. But all that being said, I'm still happy with the result. Okay, now let's go over all the shots and I'll explain how I did them. I didn't make a storyboard or anything like that. I had 3 shots in my head. This one, and this one. Those shots I knew that I needed for my story, and all the other shots I just build around those 3. When I see the location, it's easier for me to visualize all the other shots. And because I didn't have a lot of time each day, I did a few shots every day, and then I went home, looked at the shots, I started editing a little bit, and then I came up with new shots. So all the other shots came organically as we went. Okay, now let's take a look at all the shots. The intro shots, well, they're pretty basic. They set the mood and the atmosphere. Now, a problem that I had was that I wanted some wind. You can hear the wind in the sound effects, and I really wanted that windy atmosphere. But the problem, there was no wind. So I had to call the Universal Studios Special Effects department to ask for help, and well, they said it's pretty easy to create wind. So that's what I did. I created wind. Okay, and then the shot with the birds. That was part luck and part... yeah, those birds, they flock around here every evening, so I knew that I would be able to get a shot with the birds, but the moon right there in that position, well, that was just luck. Also that it was visible that evening and that the birds flew past the moon. Bit of luck involved there. And then we have Joanna walking over the path to the table. Now, there are 2 ways you can do this. First of all, you can make cuts while you shoot. What I mean is, well, she starts walking and you shoot a wide, then you stop recording, you go closer, she stops walking, of course, too. You go closer, you take a shot of the feet. She walks a little bit more. You stop recording. You go for a close-up of the face. She walks a little bit more. You know, do the whole thing in parts. You make cuts while you shoot. Now, that's not ideal. A better way to do it is to do the scene a bunch of times and shoot it from different angles. That's the simplest way, and it will also give you a lot more options when editing, because you can just choose when you make cuts and you can change your mind. So we did the walking scene, a wide, then a close from behind, then a close from the front, from the side, and every time it's the same scene all over again. And then you can cut it however you want. And of course, in between you can add some extra close-up of parts of the scene. But the best way to do it is to do the scene a bunch of times and just shoot it from different angles. Now, what you have to keep an eye on is that everything looks the same every time you do the scene. For example, you don't want a string of the hoodie to go from here to here. You know, that one time you do the scene, the string is here, and then the next time you do the scene, the string is over the shoulder. And then when you start cutting it in post, well, yeah, it will jump from here to here, and people will notice that you know what I mean. So always keep an eye on that. On a real movie set, there's usually someone there specifically to keep an eye on that. But when you're doing everything yourself, it's also something you have to keep an eye on. Make sure that the hair is always the same, the strings of the hoodie, you know, all those little details. Okay, and then she arrives at the table, and it's pretty much the same thing. So taking a seat from this angle, then a wide, also one a bit closer. Again, just to have a lot of options when you start editing. And then some more Universal Studio special effects. So she's looking at her phone, and then all of a sudden there's that warm light coming from that little window in the tree. And by the way, that little window and that little staircase, I have absolutely no idea what it is. It's been there since forever, and it just inspired me to make this little short film. It was there, I used it. But don't ask me what it is, because I have absolutely no idea. But anyway, so my RGB light doesn't have a remote, and I also can't use my phone to turn it on or off. So what I did is I put it on the table, covered it with a piece of cardboard, a string attached, and I just pulled it to make the light appear all of a sudden. It's simple, but it works. And then it's the same again. So first a close and then a wide of the same scene. Now, in this case, when I cut from the close to the wide, well, for the wide, the little window has to light up. So for the close, I put the light on the table, but then for the wide shot, the light has to be in the little window. But when I cut, you know, it looks like it all of a sudden lit up. And you know, all these different angles and cuts is just to keep it interesting, because it's a very, very short film. There's no talking, and these different cuts, that keeps the flow going, you know what I mean? Of course, don't have too many cuts. I think here and there, I made one cut too many, but I think it looks okay, it flows nicely. Okay, and then she's standing up and looking at the light. One shot from over the shoulder, then another shot of her face, and then she starts walking toward the light. That whole thing I shot a few times from different angles. Also a wide shot. And again, it's very important to make sure that everything looks the same when you do the same scene over and over again. So if she reaches out with her right hand, for example, make sure that it is the right hand every time. Otherwise, you will get in trouble when you start editing. Okay, and then it's time for the grand finale, the moment where she gets sucked into the tree. And it looks like there's a lot going on there, guys, but it's actually super, super simple. So it starts with a close, she reaches out, and then I just move the camera toward her face. She grabs my arms and we struggle a little bit, and we end close to the ground. And then the second shot is just a close-up of the phone falling on the ground. So I started with a little bit of that struggle movement. I made it look like the camera falls on the ground too. And then Joanna dropped the phone and she turned away the orange light. And there's absolutely no crazy editing going on, except for a speed ramp when I go close to her face and then we do the little struggle. And then after that, it's just a hard cut to the shots of the phone falling on the ground. That's it. The movement, the chaos just hides that hard cut. Super simple, but it worked. And then it ends with some wider shots of the phone going to sleep mode. The end. That's it, guys. I mean, I hope that this video answered all of your questions. Probably not, but you know how it works. Comments and I'll answer all of your questions. The editing breakdown is for another video. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one.